Tower Defense Simulator currently has a total of 52 unique towers that all attack differently from each other. Some towers may be used for a supportive purpose, and others are sometimes used purely for DPS. Some towers are probably not as creatively created as others, but nonetheless, they all have at least one or two aspects that separate themselves from other towers. Recently, I was curious and thought to myself, what is the best overall tower in the game? Which includes their DPS, value, support, usage, and compatibility. Sure, I could sit here and rank every tower in each category and eventually come up with a winner, but at the end of the day, it would just kind of be an unbalanced way to come up with a winner. So to test who is overall the best and most self-sustainable tower, I'm going to try to solo intermediate with every tower in the game. First, some ground rules. Each tower will be tested separately with no supports, no abilities, and no skills. The reason why I'm excluding skills is because some towers might benefit from the skills I have purchased more than other towers. Every tower will be tested on one of 3 maps. Most towers will be tested on U-turn, but cliff towers such as Sniper and Mortar will be tested on Deserted Village, and towers that cost too much for U-turn will be played on Moonbase, aka the longest map in the game. I will be playing every game solo, and every tower will be given one chance unless if I mess up very badly, then I might give myself another shot at it. Autoskip will be turned on since if I don't have it on, most towers will have little to no problems until the boss wave as tested before this. Lastly, I won't intentionally do worse with a tower because I may not like it as much as other towers. I will play each tower to the best of my ability even if I'm pretty sure that the tower won't do very well. With that all out of the way, let's get into our first tower, the Scouts. Scout is honestly one of, if not the most underrated tower in the game. First of all, Scout is extremely cheap, only costing $150 to place, which is the cheapest in the game. And although his DPS is not the greatest, the value that you get for Scout's price is awesome, which is why he actually did pretty decent. After I got all 40 of my Scouts to level 3 is when I started to get overwhelmed, since level 4 Scout is honestly just not as good for the price as any other upgrade. Scout made it to wave 21 just seconds off from wave 22, which is actually a very solid start. Straight off the bat, let me get this straight. Sniper is the better starter tower, in my opinion, since there are only 3 cliff towers in total in the game, which means when I play with a level 0 to 10 player, I simply just tell them to get snipers, since I usually only use ground towers, which makes it very convenient since I don't have to worry about the low levels dealing all the good placement options. Just from my experiences, and I will stand my ground on it. But with that out of the way, let's talk about Sniper's run. Sniper was doing pretty solid in the early game, although not as good as Scout sadly, but was keeping up pretty well until the freaking Breakers and Necromancers spam pushed everything so far back and eventually ended my run on wave 18. Next up, we have the one and only Paintballer. To be honest, Paintballer wasn't that good. Sure, he was able to clear the early waves, but he just wasn't that strong to be honest. His value compared to the next tower is just kind of pathetic. He was barely able to kill the first boss and ended up dying on wave 12. For all the starter towers and some intermediate towers, every time I would join back, I would join the same lobby as Corso. And trust me when I tell you that Corso Clays is crazy, although these kids don't understand that he's AFK and is editing for the Battle Pass video. Back to the towers. Demoman is a near perfect example of a good beginner splash damage tower. He is decently cheap and deals pretty high splash damage in a reasonable radius. Demoman ended up dying on wave 14 to a stupid slime ghoul, and even if I lived there would have been plenty of enraged enemies on their way. Intermediate is literally the mode that hard counters Demoman, which is why he only survived to wave 14, which is very unfortunate since I love Demoman. Still better than Paintballer though. Hunter is just one of those towers that doesn't really have a place in the game. Hunter is literally just Sniper on the ground with a placement limit, and that's literally it. Hunter did pretty decent in the early game, mostly struggling against hordes due to his high damage and slow fire rate, similar to somebody I know. He started to get overwhelmed by literally everything and had a very close call on wave 18, yet still died on wave 19 to the boss and enraged enemies. Finally, a tower that can finally beat Scouts. Or can it? Soldier had a really good early and mid game, but started to get backed up on wave 18 due to the insane spam. He was eventually able to make it to wave 21 and die to the hidden bosses. After reviewing the footage, Soldier survived about 1 second longer than Scout did since he killed one of the 3 hidden bosses, while Scout didn't, which earned Soldier first place, finally knocking Scout down to second. I had some very high hopes for Cook Boss. Not only does he deal a high amount of damage himself, but he's also able to spawn spawn units that are able to contribute a solid amount of DPS. Perk Boss was also doing pretty well in the early and mid game, until wave 20 and started getting backed up due to the fact that many of the spawned units ended up dying. Kirk Boss eventually ended up making it to wave 22, dethroning the newly crowned soldier. Freezer's just one of those towers that's just heavily overshadowed, but still half decent. He actually did very well in the early game. The only problem with Freezer is that he's considered to be a support tower that's supposed to stall. But when you put Freezer all by himself and turn on autoskip, you probably can already guess what the conclusion will be. Not too bad of a run for being a support tower, and made it to wave 14. Militant is a very bland tower nowadays, except for the cool looking skin I have for him, and deals the most consistent damage that the game has to offer. Because of the consistency, he actually did pretty well, and made it to wave 22, doing better than Crook Boss did, earning him the first place title. Medic recently saw a crazy good buff in terms of DPS, and is honestly insane. Medic, for reference, is supposed to be a support tower that is most noted for their anti-stun mechanic, yet still did insanely good. Medic was able to roll through the early and mid game and only saw troubles on wave 20. Eventually, Medic died to the failed experiments, who had 650 health. Don't quote me on this, but I think Shoddy Gunner has been rebalanced about 5 times ever since its release. Shoddy Gunner actually had a very strong early game, especially thanks to how powerful level 2 spam is. Shoddy Gunner was doing so good to the point where he became the first tower so far to kill the failed experiments because of how effective he is. If you thought he was done there, you couldn't be more wrong. The spam of Shoddy Gunners eventually got me all the way to wave 26, where I died to a bunch of hidden bosses and failed experiments. Overall, really good performance by Shoddy Gunner. Pyromancer is actually the only tower in the game that I still have an OG skin on, which is the 2020 Valentine's Pyromancer skin. Anyways, Pyromancer didn't actually do too shabby. He had a solid early game and really only struggled against tankier enemies, but at that, thanks to Afterburn, Pyromancer was actually able to eliminate these threats with ease, until 2 slime spawn ghouls near the end of my base, which was beyond stupid, but still decent for the type of tower that Pyromancer is. Wave 14. Ace Pilot was doing pretty well in the run, having a very high amount of DPS, with the only problem being that his attacking style can be pretty unreliable. Even with that, Ace Pilot still did really good in the early game along with the mid game. That was until the failed experiments and hidden boss pushed very far, and although I was able to take them down, I wasn't able to take down the sneaky slime in the pocket that the hidden boss spawned upon death. Still a good run, cut short at wave 22. This next tower probably got the best rework that any tower in this game has ever seen. This tower being the Rocketeer. The Rocketeer, thanks to their 2 reworks that were released recently, was actually doing pretty well in the early game. Gladly, Rocketeer had hidden detection this time around, so he was able to survive the hidden enemies. He was doing pretty solid, but eventually the horde of tanky slows ended Rocketeer's run on wave 20. Trapper is easily one of the most underrated towers in the game. He did pretty solid in the early and mid game, although there weren't really many times that would make me say that this tower is insanely good, guys. I would say that it is overall really solid and doesn't really get the appreciation it deserves, but he eventually died to a speedy boss charging into the base at wave 21. My honest predictions with military base were pretty straightforward. I was expecting that it was going to do pretty well in the early game, but eventually start getting destroyed by the hordes of zombies in the mid game. He was doing pretty good and annihilated the ghoul. Surely the necromancer will be more of a challenge. Nope. So surely he's going to get destroyed by the living experiment, right? Nope. What a shocker. What about the failed experiment? Nope. Okay, bro, chill out, military base. Surely you're going to die eventually, right? Nope. Military base was doing amazing, although being a spawner tower, which is heavily time-based, yet still was doing insanely good. That was until he died on wave 30 after the crazy spam of enemies. Not much is to be said about this tower. It's really good when you pair it up with other towers, but honestly just sucks all by itself. Sure, he did alright, but honestly just wasn't good enough, and ended up dying on wave 14 to hidden enemies and slime enemies as well. I was having some pretty high hopes for this tower. It's able to spawn different types of units that attack in different ways, which is arguably this tower's greatest strength. But the problem that quickly arose was that I was getting backed up fairly easy by fast enemies, and my run was ended on wave 14. Not nearly what I was hoping for, and I am quite disappointed. Electroshocker is a really really solid tower, having a great chain attack that stuns and deals damage. The only problem with his tower is, of course, the fact that it has no hidden detection. Yeah, he did pretty decent, but just didn't have the ability to deal with hidden enemies. Wave 14. Howdy fellers, seems like there ain't enough room in this town for the 10 of us. Yeah, Cowboy now has a placement limit of 10. AKA plenty of lost potential. He still did very good being able to take down many tough enemies and made it all the way to wave 24, just 1 second away from wave 25. Still really good, just lacks placement limit. Warden was actually able to clear many of the waves with ease thanks to his high DPS, ability to stun, and hidden detection. He didn't really run into any problems until the Reavers and Necromancers, but was still putting up a solid fight. Wave 21. Minigunner had a very solid run. Because of his very fast single target damage, he was able to clear many of the waves with ease. His early game was great along with his mid game until he started to get backed up on wave 21 of course, and died to the speedy boss. Still a decent run, just sadly ended early due to spam. The only non-event tower without a skin. The myth, the legend, Pursuit. Pursuit was too expensive to play on U-turn, so instead I played on Mood Base, where he did survive some of the earlier waves. But he just cost way too much to get hidden detection and ended up dying on wave 11. Could have been better, but just sadly was cut short. All the towers shown on screen, which includes Commander, DJ Booth, Turret, Gatling Gun, Farm, Accelerator, Firework Technician, and Ranger, are all confirmed to be the worst towers in the game. Why, one may ask? Because they're so bad that you either can't place them or they just deal no damage. Horrible towers, heavily don't recommend. For our very first hardcore tower, we have the Brawler. The Brawler is a very strong and solid tower with a cool critical hit system that deals 50% more damage and stuns enemies. Yeah, this tower is literally rip-off Warden in his prime, but Brawler nonetheless did pretty well. Thanks to his jumping mechanic, he was able to survive all the way to wave 21 before getting overloaded with enemies. Necromancer, I personally think, is quite the opposite of Brawler, and is one of the best designed towers in the game. His summon ability carried him so hard, especially in the early and most of mid-game, until the summons just started becoming not enough, and the Necromancer got overrun by a large swarm of enemies, leading to the end of his run on wave 19. Engineer is one of the most solid towers in the game, that plays the same role all throughout the game as well. He overall has a really solid early, mid, and late game thanks to the power of their sentries. Engineer did pretty well in the early game but started to get backed up on wave 18 due to the spam of enemies, and it was slowly but surely becoming more and more difficult to keep up with the amount of enemies until a large swarm broke right through and ended Engineer's run on wave 21. Now we're moving into the event towers. The first of these event towers is Harvester. Harvester is the definition of a mid tower. Their primary attack is much similar to Necromancers and has just a straight up worse ability in my opinion. The damage just ended up not being enough and Harvester's run was ended early on wave 12. Please buff this tower, I beg. This is probably the most unique and most odd tower that the game has to offer. The Elf Camp. I don't fully understand this tower since it doesn't really have a place in the game, but that's okay, because with it you can spam spawn a bunch of units that aren't that good. Except for the Gunner Elves, those are good. Elf Camp struggled because of the large swarm of enemies and was just way too overwhelmed, losing on wave 12. The Slasher is overall a pretty solid melee tower. He deals good damage and attacks quickly as well. The only problem being that he's a melee tower, so basically he has no range, and died on wave 19 to the Living Experiment. Not bad. Ever since this tower was released, I kind of always hated this tower because of how dookie the event was, but that doesn't save Jester since nowadays he's kind of a mid tower and just wasn't that good. Made it to wave 14 though. Executioner is easily the most buggy tower in the game and has always been. It needs a change because the logic is just not logicking with how these axe throws be working. Needs to be reworked because I don't think this tower deserves a wave 12 compared to making it to the final wave the first time I did this video. Terrible tower, please buff. Finally, a promising tower after a huge amount of slaughter. Elementalist. Elementalist is a very underrated tower and is very powerful, being able to attack with either frost or fire and having very useful abilities for both frost and fire as well. Elementalist was able to survive the early game and was doing pretty well in the mid game thanks to his heat wave ability, which honestly carries this tower. Eventually, he just got way too overrun and died to the failed experiments on wave 22. Very solid run by Elementalist. Sledger did pretty alright in the run. He was able to clear some of the early waves and was able to indirectly hit some of the hidden enemies, but was eventually ended on wave 13 due to some slows with the tank effect. Let me say this before anything else, but dang, I was not familiar with Snowballer's game, because although this tower is considered to be terrible, he actually still did very good because of how good max level is. I was honestly surprised to see him get as far as he did with no hidden detection. Wave 14. The king of TDS, the first event tower ever released, the tower with history when it comes to speedrunning, Gladiator. Yeah, he sucks now. Although he was able to clear the early game, he honestly just needs an overall buff because wave 16 is not the performance I was looking for in this tower. Before any kid starts yapping about how the Stormer buff is the best buff in all of TDS history, I know, this tower is insane, or at least used to be until he received a rebalance that now prevents players from beating hardcore with only 2 towers. Anyways, Stormer struggled quite a bit throughout his run since he didn't have a very strong early game nor mid game, and eventually his run was ended on wave 13. The Toxic Gunner is a very strong and powerful tower, being able to clear almost every single type of enemy while also being able to slow them down, except for hidden enemies. If this tower had hidden detection, they would have made it to wave 22, and I bet money on that. Actually no, I take that back, I don't want to lose money. Wave 11. In my personal opinion, I think that Frost Blaster is currently one of the top 3 best towers in the game right now, and depending on the situation, he could even be first. This tower literally has no counters whatsoever. He deals good damage, has a big range, pierces enemies, freezes enemies in one hit, and has hidden, lead, and flying detection. His early game was great, mid game was great too, but started to get backed up, and died to the failed experiments on wave 22. A freezing support tower made it to wave 22. Yeah, nice balancing there, pal. Ever since the Archer rework, I think I used Archer maybe 1 or 2 times ever since, and at that I didn't really use Archer much. But something extremely unexpected happened. Apparently, this tower packs a really, and I mean really deadly punch with his different types of arrows. His explosive arrows were especially useful since they deal very high splash damage, and as time went on, I realized that Archer was doing better than almost every tower except for maybe military base, but as time kept going on, I realized that Archer might be the chosen one. The enemies were struggling making it past the first bend, and even with Archer's placement limit of 15, he made it all the way to wave 30. I thought it was over with the living experiments and breaker spam, but surprisingly, Archer stood his ground and eventually started to focus his fire on the boss, Patient Zero, the very first tower to face off against the boss, and was actually doing very good. Eventually, he made it to the final bend and died to my archers while I also collected his logbook, which means that Archer is the very first and possibly the only tower so far to kill Patient Zero. But who knows, because we still have 6 golden towers to cover. Not much to be said here, just overall a very mid tower and only made it to wave 12, dying to an enraged enemy. In my last video, Golden Scout was the only tower able to kill the final boss, and let's see if that's true this time around as well. As expected, Golden Scout cleared the early and mid game and only started to see troubles on wave 27, but was still able to survive all the way till wave 30, but wasn't quite able to clear all the enemies since there was just way too much spam with way too much health. And Golden Scout's run was ended on wave 30 seconds after the boss spawned. Great performance, but still wasn't good enough. Golden Soldier is one of the strongest towers in the game. He deals good and consistent damage with little drawbacks, except for the fact that he only has single target options. Sadly, Golden Soldier's run was ended on wave 26 to a large amount of failed experiments and hidden bosses. Great run by Golden Soldier. Golden Crook Boss is another one of those towers that I like to argue to be one of the top 3 best towers right now. He has great potential all throughout the waves, and with his only downside being his placement limit of only 5. But in return, you get a strong tower that deals high DPS and spawns powerful units on the path. Golden Crook Boss did really well in the early game and even better in the mid game, but started to become backed up on wave 24 due to a high amount of spam which killed many of the goons. Golden Crook Boss still put up a valiant effort and made it all the way to wave 26. Great overall performance. Golden Pyromancer actually did insanely well for the type of tower he is. Remember when normal Pyro made it to wave 14? Well, the golden version of him survived an additional 5 waves, meaning that he survived until wave 19. Overall, great performance. Golden Cowboy, similar to normal Cowboy, had a very solid early game, but what killed this tower the most was the placement limit of 10. Although it wasn't very impactful in the early and mid game, it sure was in the late game because once I got all my Golden Cowboys to max level, there was essentially nothing I could do except for microwing when the enemies got to the back, which is exactly what I did. But Golden Cowboy still only made it to wave 26, although I bet I could have made it further if there wasn't a placement limit. Still a great run though. For the final tower, we have the Golden Minigunner, which I had to play on Moon Base just so he wouldn't lose early. But Golden Minigunner's run was still cut short on wave 15 due to slimes and enraged enemies. Mid performance by such a good tower. Before anybody mentions it, I know. I missed a few towers, which includes Hacker, Biologist, and Commando. I didn't do these towers since I don't actually have them, but I do know from a friend that Hacker is able to reach up to wave 19, but I still don't know about Commando and Biologist. Now it's time to reveal the 3 winners of the video. In third place, we have Golden Scout, who was able to survive till wave 30, dying to spam seconds after the boss spawned. And in second place, we have the Military Base, who also died a few seconds after the boss spawned, but killed more enemies than Golden Scout did. And for first place, the underdog, the winner, the one and only Archer. Archer was the only tower able to actually fight the boss, while also being the only one to kill it. This conclusion took me by surprise, but anyways, if you want to see more videos from me with even higher quality in the future, please consider liking and subscribing. It does so much for me, and I hope to see you guys again in another video.